All right, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to lecture 59, VMS 300. This is the final class we'll have this semester, and today we'll just be doing some key questions and PollEverywhere questions as well from the reproductive system. So if you would have noticed, we have around 63 slides, and so we won't have time to go through each slide in detail. The purpose of this lecture is to show you where the answers are for the various key questions and also the multiple choice questions as well, right? So we'll go through it quickly, and I'll show you where the answers are, and even for the multiple choice questions I'll tell you what the answers are and the rationale behind that as well. And I also want to make an announcement about the exam 3 grades. So I was doing something this morning, and that's why there were all the changes in the grades, and so it's my fault, and we will have it fixed. So apparently there was one question which had 2 correct answers, and so I was trying to fix that, and when I fixed it, it did the automatic grading for everything else, right? And so the manually added points were not added anymore, and so that's why we have to redo that part manually. So just bear with us. We will definitely make sure that you don't have points lost. Okay, so that being said, are there any questions for me before we get started? No? Okay, great, fantastic. So here are the key questions on the male reproductive system. I have color coded these questions, and I've made sure that the questions in the different lectures, they have a different color code just to help you with ease of finding them. Question 1, what is the path of the sperm through the reproductive tract, and what is the function of each of these components? And so this is just talking about what happens to the sperm when it's being ejaculated. What is the path it takes? So it's going to start in the testes, and it'll move from the seminiferous tubules down through the epididymis, then up the vas deferens, and then it's going to enter the ejaculatory duct, which will in turn join with the urethra. And so the question is asked, what is the function of each of these components? So we see that in the seminiferous tubules is where the sperm will be produced, right, where it undergoes spermatogenesis. And the epididymis is where there will be the maturation of the sperm taking place, and that's where the sperm will be stored. And we finally see that the accessory glands, they are going to release secretions into the male reproductive tract so that it makes sure that the sperm is ready for fertilizing the egg. So this includes having nutrients available for the sperm, ensuring that there are clotting factors, anti-clotting factors, and also things which will make the sperm motile as well. Next question, what are the components of the seminal fluid and where do they come from? So we see that the 3 accessory glands will have various secretions, and you're required to know all 3. And we see that the seminal glands or the seminal vesicles will produce the majority of the semen volume. So 60 to 70% of the semen volume arises from the seminal glands, and this has a number of components such as fructose, prostaglandins, fibrinogen. So all of these you're supposed to know what their functions are. Question 3, when does spermatogenesis start in males? The short answer is it's going to start at puberty, because it is at puberty where you have the GnRH hormone being released, and that will have a downstream effect on releasing FSH and LH, which will act on different cells in the testes, which can lead to sperm production. Question 4, what are the steps in spermatogenesis, and specify the name of the developing sperm in each of the steps. So we see that the steps in spermatogenesis will start with the spermatogonium, and it will end in the sperm being formed. But the spermatogonium will give rise to the primary spermatocyte, which will give rise to the secondary spermatocyte, which will give rise to spermatids, and then that will undergo spermiogenesis, right, where the spermatids will give rise to the mature sperm. When does the sperm mature? So the sperm will mature as it undergoes spermiogenesis, and it will finally take this form. Question 6, what are the 2 steps of capacitation and when do they occur? So we see that capacitation is going to influence the tail of the sperm to become motile. There will also be changes in the head of the sperm which permits it to eventually fertilize the egg. So we see that the seminal fluids will permit this motility, and then when the sperm is exposed to the female reproductive tract, it can become hypermotile because of the hormones which will cause calcium to enter into the sperm. So it becomes hypermotile in the female reproductive tract. Now, as far as the head of the sperm is concerned, we see that there are different proteins which will be found on the sperm head when it is leaving the seminiferous tubules, when it's in the epididymis, and then as it is ejaculated and it's in the female reproductive tract, these proteins are going to be redistributed on the head of the sperm so that the fertilization can occur. So these are the various steps in capacitation. Question 7, what are the 2 main cells involved in spermatogenesis and what are their roles? So we see that the 2 main cells involved are the Leydig cells or the interstitial endocrine cells. They produce testosterone, and that can trigger, that can facilitate spermatogenesis. And also the nurse cells or the Sertoli cells, they are the ones which will also play a role in nourishing the sperm, right? It will help support the sperm development. And you can see that the various functions of the Sertoli cells are mentioned in this slide as well. Question 8, what is the HPG axis in males and females? So HPG is referring to the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So the hypothalamus will release a hormone which will in turn act on the pituitary gland, which will in turn cause the pituitary gland to release more hormones which will act on the gonads, namely the ovaries and the testes. So we see that the cascade in males is shown in the left panel, and this is mainly going to affect the seminiferous tubules, right, in the testes, whereas in females the cascade is shown, and this will have an impact on the uterine lining, and it will also have an impact on the ovary as well. So this question is asking you to describe both of these slides. So with that, we move on to the various questions in the female reproductive system. Question 1, what are the main organs of the female reproductive tract and what is the function of each of these components? So you notice here that the function of the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, and the uterus and will be mentioned in this slide. So notice that the ovaries will produce the hormones and release the oocytes, whereas the uterine tubes will provide an optimal environment for the sperm and the eggs, and also help in movement of both the sperm and the eggs as well. The uterus will help the egg to implant and help the embryo to develop into the fetus. And notice there are different layers in the uterus. The inner layer will provide nourishment for the developing embryo, whereas this muscular layer will help in delivering the baby during labor. And the function of the vagina and the external genitalia has been shown here as well, right? So this slide is just showing you where the answers are for these questions. When does oogenesis start in females? Again, oogenesis is going to start in the fetal development of the baby girl, right? And so that's when this mitosis starts this in the fetus. But then when meiosis 1 is entered in, it's going to be halted until puberty occurs. So at puberty, FSH will be released. That will permit meiosis 1 to resume, and then it's the meiosis II will be completed only during fertilization. What are the various steps in oogenesis? Specify the name of the developing egg within each follicle type. So we see that starting with the primordial follicle, the primordial follicle will give rise to the primary follicle, which will give rise to a secondary follicle, which will give rise to the tertiary follicles, and it is this tertiary follicle which will have the secondary oocyte, but until that point you only have a primary oocyte inside these follicles. What are the various phases of the ovarian cycle? So we can divide the ovarian cycle into two phases, namely the the follicular phase and the luteal phase. So the follicular phase is where the follicle is developing, but then the luteal phase will be entered once the egg has been released from the follicle. Next question is, what is the uterine cycle and how does it relate to the ovarian cycle? Again, the answer is found in this slide, but the changes in the uterus during the uterine cycle is shown in the lowest panel, whereas the corresponding changes in the ovarian cycle are shown in the above panel. And keep in mind that both of these cycles are regulated by changes in the hypothalamic and the pituitary hormones in the first panel, and also it is regulated by changes in the ovarian hormones shown in the third panel as well. Question 6, what is the HPG axis in females? Describe the hormones involved and how they change throughout the cycle and provide both positive and feedback mechanisms. So we see that we talked about this hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis both in males and females, but we find that there is this positive feedback effect only in the female reproductive system. And so the negative feedback is through inhibin, which will stop FSH release, and even estrogen can inhibit FSH release to a small extent. But notice that estrogen also has a negative feedback effect on LH release, but when the estrogen levels reaches a certain threshold, that's when it's going to have a positive feedback effect to cause the luteinizing hormone to be released. And as far as the negative feedback effect of progesterone is concerned, it's going to have a negative feedback effect on the release of GnRH, which will in turn decrease the release of FSH and LH as well. So I hope you see how the negative feedback effect of progesterone is what will play an important role in serving as a contraceptive in the hormonal preparations. And this is just to remind you that in the female reproductive cycle, both the uterus and the ovaries are impacted. So what are the different types of contraceptives and how do they work? We see that there are the barrier types of contraceptives such as condoms, cervical caps, diaphragms, and they will be effective in preventing contraception, but one of the main importance of that is it can help with the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. But we spent quite a bit of time talking about the mechanism of contraceptives which use hormonal preparations. So the combination preparations will use both estrogen and progesterone, and that will mimic the female reproductive cycle, which will not only impair the follicle in the formation of the follicles, but will also prevent ovulation. And so without the ovulation taking place, pregnancy cannot take place. But for those who can't use estrogen in the contraceptive, they can use the progesterone only pills, and progesterone will act more locally in the reproductive tract to make the environment very unfavorable for the sperm to survive. There are other longer acting contraceptives like the copper intrauterine device, which will make the environment very hostile for the sperm. But there are also other devices which will release hormones slowly over a period of time. And finally, we talked about the emergency contraceptives, which can also be intrauterine devices, or the morning after pill, and there are different pills depending on the weight of the individual. Next question, what are the different types of sexually transmitted diseases, and why are they prevalent in adolescents and in the elderly? Right, so we see that the few sexually transmitted diseases which we discussed in class are shown in this upper panel, and I will hold you responsible for knowing the names of these diseases and whether it's caused by which type of pathogen. Is it a bacteria, virus, or a parasite, or a protozoan, not a parasite, if it's caused by a protozoan. And we see that the reasons for increased risk of sexually transmitted diseases in the in young people is because of risky behavior like binge drinking, multiple sexual partners, and unprotected sex. But also the increased use of dating apps has increased the risk of sexually transmitted disease as well. And even among the elderly, there are some reasons for the increased risk of STDs, and that is also listed in this slide here. Moving on to part 3, we see that sex determinants and the disorders were covered in this series of lectures, and there were only 2 questions I want you to answer. Question 1 is, what are the 3 levels of sexual differentiation and which factors influence each level? And we see that the chromosomal sex will be the first level of determinant, and that will influence whether ovaries or testes are formed, and depending on whether ovaries or testes are formed, appropriate hormones are released by these gonads, which can influence the phenotypic sex. And here we talked about why the presence of the Y chromosome will lead to the formation of testes, because we see that the Y chromosome has the SRY gene, which will activate SOX9, and that can repress the signaling molecules which lead to the expression of ovaries, right? But if SOX9 is not activated, then we see that SOX9 cannot inhibit these other pathways, and these other pathways will in turn block SOX9, and that can lead to ovary development. We also find that once the ovaries or the testes is formed, the types of hormones released by them can influence the internal reproductive tracts which are formed. So in the case of the Wolffian ducts, which are found in males, they need testosterone to remain, and the Mullerian duct will be degraded by the anti-Mullerian hormone. And as far as the external genitalia is concerned, masculinization requires the dihydrotestosterone, also known as the supertestosterone, which is very potent. But without these hormones, you will have the female reproductive external genitalia. The next question is, what would be the chromosomal sex, gonads, and reproductive structures for individuals with the Turner syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and the androgen insensitivity syndrome? So in each of these, I've talked about how the chromosomal sex, the gonads, and the external reproductive structures will be influenced. And I would request you not to memorize this, because it's very easy to get confused if you just memorize this, but rather be able to walk through how the chromosomes can determine what type of gonads are formed, and the gonads will determine which hormones are released and how they will in turn affect the internal reproductive structures and the external reproductive structures. So with that, we move to the last lecture on fertilization, pregnancy, and parturition. And question 1 is, what are the various steps involved in fertilization? And all of these steps are just mentioned here in detail. I hope you know all of them. Question 2, how are the oocyte and the sperm prepared and readied for fertilization? We see that as far as the oocyte is concerned, it should be released from the ovary, and it should be present in the fallopian tube. But the sperm, it has to undergo capacitation, where there are changes taking place both in the tail of the sperm to make it motile, and there are also changes taking place in the head so that it can bind with the oocyte. What are the 3 stages of fetal development? 3 stages are the germinal stage, embryonic stage, and fetal stage, and the duration of each of these stages is shown in this slide, and also what uniquely happens in each of these steps is mentioned here as well. So the germinal stage will start with conception and until the blastocyst is formed, and the embryonic stage is when the blastocyst is going to take on more human characteristics. So the inner cell mass takes on human characteristics, and starting from week 9 onwards, the embryo is considered as a fetus until birth. The next question is, why is oocyte activation important, and how is polyspermy prevented? And I just wanted to zoom into these 2 paragraphs in this slide, and it shows that when the plasma membrane of the sperm and the egg fuse, it leads to a couple of things happening. Firstly, it's going to activate the oocyte so that it completes meiosis II, and secondly, it also triggers the cortical reaction by making these vesicles to release their enzymes, and that will cause the zona pellucida to harden, and that prevents any additional sperm from fertilizing the egg. What is the difference between fertilization, pregnancy, and gestation? So fertilization is the fusion of the male and the female gametes, whereas pregnancy and gestation, the terms have been used interchangeably, but this recent statement from this journal here, they are saying that gestation should include the time of fertilization all the way to birth, whereas pregnancy should refer to the point of the implantation of the embryo in the uterine wall up to birth. Next question, explain the role of the acrosome reaction in fertilization. So this is zooming into these 3 bullet points in this slide, and the acrosomal reaction is referring to the release of the hydrolytic enzymes which are found in the acrosome, and those enzymes will cause a tunnel to be opened up within the zona pellucida, and thus the head of the sperm can come in contact with the plasma membrane of the egg, and that's when the membranes can fuse. Describe the process of development from a zygote to an embryo. So we see that the zygote is going to be formed when the sperm fuses with the egg, but then in order to form an embryo, we see that the zygote is undergoing a number of cellular divisions. So there's a 2-cell stage, 4-cell stage, and eventually it forms this cluster of cells called the morula, which will in turn give rise to the blastocyst. And in the blastocyst, there are 2 distinct parts. There is the inner cell mass, which eventually develops into the embryo, whereas the outer part, the trophoblast, will help in sustaining the development of the embryo. Question 8, what are the functions of the placenta, and what are the hormones produced by the placenta? So we see that the functions of the placenta is manifold. It can function as the lungs, liver, the kidneys. It can also help with the synthesis of red blood cells, immune function. So it has many functions, but we took a closer look at its function in gas exchange. So the key thing to notice here is that the maternal and the fetal blood will never come directly in contact with each other, because we see that the capillaries of the fetus, they are within these structures called as the villi, and it is in the space surrounding the villi where the maternal pools of blood are. So there is no direct contact between the maternal and the fetal blood. And this slide here shows the various hormones which are produced by the placenta, and the hormones and knowing their function is really critical, because that will help us understand what are the symptoms experienced by women during the first, second, and third trimester. Question 9, what are the changes that take place in the mother's body during pregnancy? So we talked about the changes in the first, second and third trimester, and for each of these symptoms I mentioned the mechanistic basis and which hormone was affecting it, or maybe what type of organ system was affected to lead to a specific type of symptom. So I hope you know the reasoning behind it. And this last panel here is just showing you how the changes which take place during pregnancy, it's going to affect the entire body. All the organ systems are affected. And then the next question is, what are the changes that take place in the fetus during pregnancy? So we see that during the first trimester the major organ systems are being formed, but in the second and third trimester there will be additional growth, and there will be some development of the organs like the lungs, the brain, and the and the kidneys as well. And also unique to the third trimester is that's when the baby will be positioned with the head downward. Question 11, how does oxytocin aid in the delivery of the baby? So we see that oxytocin is going to trigger muscular contractions, and this will work in a positive feedback loop. So more the cervix is being stretched because of these contractions, more oxytocin will be released, which will increase the intensity of these contractions. Question 12, this is the last key question. What are the hormones which are responsible for milk production and injection? Milk production is due to prolactin, which is produced by the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, whereas milk ejection is due to oxytocin, which is released by the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. So with that, we will move on to the multiple choice questions, right? And I hope you know where to find all of these answers which we just now discussed, and I hope you're able to repeat them from memory. So let's just quickly go through these questions in the remaining 22 minutes, right? So which of the following is true? Is it A, anti-Mullerian hormone is necessary for the development of the Mullerian duct, estrogen is necessary for the development of ovaries, testosterone is necessary for the development of testes, chromosomal sex determines gonadal sex, which then determines the phenotypic sex? A, B, C, or D? What is it? C. You think testosterone is necessary for development of testes? Anybody else? What causes testes to be formed? Was it? SOX9. Is that a hormone? It's not. So what is the answer for this, folks? D. D is the right answer, right? So both, we see chromosomal sex is going to determine the gonadal sex, which will in turn determine the phenotypic sex. And all the first three statements are false. Only D is true. This is clear, folks? Yes? Okay. An individual with an XY individual with the androgen insensitivity disorder would develop the following: ovary and Wolffian ducts, testes and Mullerian ducts, ovary and both Mullerian and Wolffian ducts, testes and no ducts. Why is that? Correct. So you have AMH from the testes, which will block the Mullerian ducts, but the testes which is produced, the testosterone which is produced by the testes cannot help the Wolffian duct to remain, because the receptor for testosterone is not functional, right? So the answer can be seen in this slide here. RSPO1/Wnt4 is responsible for which of the following? Initiating puberty, triggering ovulation, development of the ovary, maintenance of the corpus luteum. What is RSPO and Wnt4 responsible for? You can look at this slide and tell me the answer. What is it, A, B, C, or D? C, right? So we see that even beta-catenin along with RSPO1 and Wnt4 play a role in the development of the ovaries. After completion of meiosis II, all gametes are blank. Are they diploid, haploid, aneuploid, or euploid? B, they are haploid, right? Because you can see right here, they only have one copy of the 23 chromosomes at the end of meiosis II. Okay, a mutated Y chromosome that lacked an SRY gene would lead to the blank. Is it degradation of the Wolffian duct, development of testes, activation of SOX9, or masculinization of the external genitalia? If you don't have the Y chromosome having SRY, would it be A, B, C, or D? You figure out the answer from this slide, folks. So think about this. You don't have the Y, right? SRY gene. If that is not present, so can you see why you need to have this pathway in your mind? Unless you're able to draw it out, this type of question will be pretty challenging. A, B, C, or D? A. Yes, A is the right answer. Who said that? A. Yeah. Why?
Would you not produce as much testosterone and you'll be able to keep those Wolffian duct?
You will not have testes at all, right? Without the SRY gene, testes won't be produced. If the testes is not produced, then you will not have testosterone or AMH, right? So we will definitely have degradation of the Wolffian duct. Right, there won't be development of testes, there won't be activation of SOX9, and there won't be masculization of the external genitalia. Yes?
If C said deactivation, would that then be right?
It would be maybe blocking of SOX9. Deactivation, yes, that would be correct as well. But that's not what is said, right? Yeah. Well, that's a good idea for maybe an alternate version of this question. Which of the following does not develop from the Mullerian duct? Uterus, uterine tubes, also known as fallopian tubes or oviducts, cervix, or the lower vagina? Can look at this slide and tell me the answer. A, B, C, D? D, yes, D is correct, because we see that the upper vagina is produced from the Mullerian duct, but the lower vagina will be part of the external genitalia, right, which is not part of the, it's not developing from the Mullerian duct. So the answer is right here. So in males, you would find receptors for the follicle stimulating hormones on which cells, right? So would it be the granulosa cells, the Nurse cells, also known as the Sertoli cells, theca cells, or the interstitial endocrine cells? What? A, B, C, or D? B is correct. Yes, B is correct, because as shown in this slide, we see that the FSH hormones will act on the Nurse cells and they will have certain secretions. So next question, what do you think about granulosa cells and theca cells? Where are they found? Are they also in the testes? Where are they found? Yes? They are in the ovaries, yes. And I mentioned about the theca and the granulosa cells when we talked about menopause, right? And so, right. So granulosa cells and theca cells are in the ovaries. The path of sperm through the male reproductive system is it A, B, C, or D? Testes, will it make the sperm move from the testes or into the seminal vesicles, in the epididymis, prostate gland, ductus deferens? C? A? The answer is right here in this slide. Think about what happens from the testes. Testes to B, yes. So it will go to the epididymis, and from the epididymis it goes to the ductus deferens, and then from there it goes to the ejaculatory duct. That is actually skipped out, but then from the ejaculatory duct it will eventually go to the urethra. Is this clear, folks? This is a straightforward anatomy question, right? All right, so we see that fibrinogen, which forms the clot in the vagina, is found in which of the following secretions? Is it the secretion from the seminal vesicles, prostate gland, bulbourethral gland, or the epididymis? You can look at this. So which of the glands will produce the secretion where fibrinogen will be present? A, yes, it is the seminal vesicles, right? And here it says fibrinogen forms this temporary clot in the vagina, and this is found in the secretion from the seminal gland. The blood testis barrier is located between which of the following? Is it the capillary endothelium and the seminiferous tubules, or is it, so here's the capillary endothelium or the seminiferous tubules? Is it between the primary and the secondary spermatocyte? Would it be between the spermatogonia and the primary spermatocytes, or is it between the secondary spermatocytes and the spermatids? B? C. C is correct. It's going to be found between the spermatogonia and the primary spermatocytes. And notice that the blood testis barrier is shown by this dotted line. And I mentioned that this blood testis barrier is formed by tight junctions, right? And these tight junctions are not like a cement wall, they're more like a sliding door, right? So when the spermatogonia undergoes mitosis to form two primary spermatocytes, one of them will move into this lumen because the blood testis barrier is very dynamic, so it will permit the primary spermatocyte to move into the lumen, and thereby it will start moving into the next stage of development. Yes?
Is that barrier like to scale with the spermatocytes, or is it bigger like real life?
This is just a cartoon, so I'm not sure if it's to scale or not. Yeah, but I've also shown you another figure where it may be more to scale. Yeah. So moving on, sperm entering the lumen of the seminiferous tubules are blank. Are they mature but immotile, mature and motile, immature and immotile, immature but motile? A, B, C, or D? You can just read this slide and tell me the answer. The key for this question is in this slide. When they leave the seminiferous tubules, are they mature? Yes or no? Are they motile? No. So what is the answer? C. Right? So the answer is C. They are neither mature or motile, because we see that the maturation takes place in the epididymis, right? So it moves from the seminiferous tubule to the epididymis where it matures. But then is it motile in the epididymis? No, right? It has to come in contact with the fluids released by the accessory glands. The final step of capacitation occurs in the blank. Is it in the tail of the epididymis, the vas deferens, or the ductus deferens, or is it in the urethra or in the female reproductive tract? A, B, C, or D? Yes. Yes, D is correct. The final step of capacitation will take place in the female reproductive tract. And we see that this initial motility is going to be gained by the sperm when it is coming in contact with the seminal fluid. But there are going to be changes where the proteins which are on the surface of the sperm's head, they are going to be redistributed only during capacitation. So as it moves from the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis, there are certain proteins which will be expressed on the surface, and then as it's being ejaculated, more proteins are going to be expressed but the redistribution finally takes place in the female reproductive tract. And also in the female reproductive tract, there will be hypermotility of the sperm, right, due to some hormones which lead to calcium entry into the sperm, and that makes it hypermotile. Okay, the female germ cells enter meiosis 1. Is it before birth, during puberty, at fertilization, or during menopause? The answer is on this slide. A, B, C, or D? A. Yes, it is before birth, as shown right here. Before birth is when it enters meiosis 1. So another question on the same slide. Female germ cells complete meiosis 2 when? Before birth, during puberty, at fertilization, during menopause? What? At fertilization, yes. It is at fertilization where, when the two plasma membranes of the sperm and the oocyte fuse, that the egg will be activated to complete meiosis 2. Okay, a large surge of luteinizing hormone secretion is a trigger for which of the following? Is it the onset of puberty, ovulation, menstruation, or menopause? A, B, C, or D? Here's the luteinizing hormone having a surge. What is it going to cause? Ovulation. So that's answer is B. That's when ovulation takes place. Which uterine phase is marked by the initial buildup of the endometrium in response to rising estrogen levels? So is it the secretory phase, proliferative phase, luteal phase, or the menstruation? The initial buildup of the endometrial lining. What is it? Proliferative phase. Yeah, it's B, as shown right here. As you have the buildup of the estrogen levels, the rise of estrogen levels, you have the buildup of the endometrial lining. So high levels of GnRH will lead to an increase in blank. Is it follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary gland, testosterone from the theca cells, inhibin from the granulosa cells, or all of the above? A, B, C, or D? I really hope you know these answers by looking at these slides. So the answer is all of the above. All of this will happen due to the action of GnRH. Okay, high levels of estrogen from the dominant follicle cause a blank feedback effect to the hypothalamus that leads to blank levels of the luteinizing hormone. Is it A, B, C, D, or E? Again, the answer is in this slide, and I want you to focus on what's happening when estrogen levels are released. Is it going to have a negative feedback effect or positive feedback effect? So when the levels are low, it will have a negative feedback effect, but when the levels are high, it has a positive feedback effect, and that will lead to the release of luteinizing hormone. So the answer is D. Is that clear, folks? Yes? Okay. Okay, labor involves which of the following? Is it increased progesterone to prevent the degradation of the corpus luteum, increased relaxin to inhibit oxytocin, increased oxytocin to promote myometrial contractions, or is it the contraction of the cervix? C, yes. We see that the oxytocin will promote the myometrial contractions in a positive feedback effect. So during the first trimester of pregnancy, the corpus luteum is prevented from degradation by which of the following? HCG from the placenta, prolactin from the anterior pituitary gland, estrogen secreted by the follicle, or inhibin secreted by the granulosa cells. The answer is actually A. We find that HCG, it not only makes the pregnant woman feel pretty sick and nauseous, but it's also going to act on the corpus luteum to prevent it from degrading, because if the corpus luteum degrades, progesterone levels will drop and the pregnancy will terminate. So HCG is what prevents the corpus luteum from degradation. Okay, infant suckling stimulates the secretion of blank to produce milk and blank to eject milk. What produces milk? prolactin, right? And oxytocin causes the release of milk. So the answer is D. And which of the following act as a contraceptive by directly inhibiting a hypothalamic hormone? Is it follicle stimulating hormone, estrogen, progesterone, or luteinizing hormone? C, yes, it is progesterone, which is going to have a negative feedback effect on GnRH, which is the hormone released by the hypothalamus. Which of the following STDs is caused by a bacteria? Is it Trichomoniasis, syphilis, genital HPV, or AIDS? Syphilis, right? So I hope you know what kind of pathogen leads to which type of disease. The nausea and tiredness during the first trimester can be attributed to the effects of A, human placental lactogen, B, estrogen, C, progesterone, or D, human chorionic gonadotrophin. D, yes, it is HCG, human chorionic gonadotrophin. What's your question? Oh, you're giving the answer, okay. Yeah, it is D. So it is shown right here. HCG function is which leads to nausea and tiredness as well. The swelling of the ankles and face during the pregnancy is due to blank. Impact of the hormones on the connective tissue, increased blood volume, reduced insulin sensitivity, activation of the melanocyte stimulating hormone. B is the right answer, right? So I really hope you know the mechanistic explanation for why these various symptoms are caused. So it is the increased blood volume which can lead to swelling of the hands and feet. So in this last couple of minutes, I just want to thank Michelle, our course coordinator, and also the co-instructor. And I want to thank my grad TAs, Ebony, Hannah, Ian, Kiana, Colton, Kendra, and Kaylee, and all the undergrad teaching assistants as well. And thank you all for a great semester. And we covered a lot, and I hope you take away one take-home message, which is to be thankful, because we talked about a lot of pathologies, and if you don't suffer from at least a few of them, there's definitely a reason for gratitude, right? So with that, thank you all, and I wish you the best for the exams. You're welcome.